Hi, it's Kylie from Stampers Workshop. Today we're making a really simple card using the Blessings of Home stamp set and the Coordinating Flowers of Home die set. It's actually a really simple card, and it's one that you could make in lots of different colorways, and it'll also look really pretty. Start by taking a card base. I'm using a Highland Heather card base, and then randomly stamp your image in the same color, so Highland Heather, all over the card base. Make sure that you re-ink between stamping, because as you stamp over the edge, you'll end up with a line across the stamp, and you'll have some darker ink and some lighter ink from where it's stamped off. So it'll look a little bit funny on your card base. Okay, once you've done that, pop your card base aside, we won't need that for a while, and stamp the image again, this time in Tuxedo Black, Memento ink. We're using Memento because we're going to colour with STAMPIN blends. And this is probably the most time consuming part of the whole card. Of course, that does depend on how much detail you do with your colouring. I'm starting off by colouring with the light granny apple green. I'm going to use both the light and the dark. I usually come through, it depends on the image, but my usual process is to start with the light, and then I come back with the dark, and then I sort of blend it out again with the light. But it does depend on how big the shape is as to my actual process. So here though, I am starting with the light. You'll see that I don't necessarily flick the colour out right to the edge. That's because I sort of use that white space to add some highlight. It's up to you. If you want to colour right to the edge, that's fine. If you want to leave some white space, it's fine. Colouring is so personal. Just do what feels good to you, what looks good to you. I then come in with the dark granny apple green, and I'm following the lines of the drawing to know where to add the colour. I also think about if another leaf is crossing over the top, then I might add a little bit more darkness in the underneath section. But I just sort of do what feels right to me, and that's what I recommend you do too. Once I've finished adding all the dark colour, I'll come in again with the light granny apple green and just gently flick the ink over the top, and that sort of blends the colours together. I do once again try not to go right to the very edge. You'll find too that especially in small areas the ink will bleed, and so it might even fill up that space anyway. So you don't have to go right up to the edge, because really we've coloured it 3 times. So that's a lot of ink that's going into little places. But you can see already how it's starting to pop off the page. Once I finish with the leaves, I'm moving on to the small flowers. And they're just going to be pool party, because I love that colour. I would use it for everything if I could, I think. I start with a layer of the light pool party, and then I just come in and add a little bit of dimension with the dark pool party. It's such a small area. I don't need to go back in and blend them. In fact, if I went back and blended them, I'd probably find that it would bleed outside the line because it's such a concentration of ink. Next, I'm doing the centres of the flowers, and I'm going to use the same for both. I start with a little bit of light Daffodil Delight, just a dot on the small flowers, that's all it needs, and a little bit more on the bigger flowers. And then I'll come in again and just do another little dot of the dark Daffodil Delight, just on the small flowers, but I add a little bit more of the colour to the larger flowers. And don't you think it's starting to look really pretty already? Right, now we're moving on to colouring the last 2 flowers. I want them to match my cardstock base, which is Highland Heather, so I'm going to use Highland Heather light and dark. Now you'll see I've got the fresh freesia there as well to the side, but in the end I decided not to use them. I thought that I might use the 4 colours just to really lift them, but I didn't need them. So I started with the dark Highland Heather and just flicked them out from the centre and just over the sort of lines that were already there on the stamp design, and rotate it out and flick away from you. And once I'd finished that for all of the dark Highland Heather, I then came back in and repeated it with the light Highland Heather. And I start at the centre of the flower and flick out over what's already coloured right to the end. And that sort of helps to blend it all in. And once again, I do leave that little, I don't flick right to the end because I end up with that white highlight. And if it bleeds that way, that's fine as well. Okay, so now we're up to die cutting. So I've just picked out the die from the coordinating die set, run it through my Big Shot. I usually use a post-it note to hold it in place. In fact, I use post-its for everything, to mask, to hold dies in place, to hold stencils in place, everything. Okay, the video is going to sort of jump around a little bit here because I've cut things out because I didn't end up using them. For example, I originally stamped the sentiment on Highland Heather and I just thought, oh, that's way too much purple. It just didn't look good. And I also saw a random scalloped rectangle shape and I thought, oh, actually I like that. So I decided, it was on my desk, so I decided to use that. So that was my original thought pattern. I kind of left that bit in so I could tell you about it, but I took out all the other visual because it went for a few minutes and you didn't need to see. Instead, I've taken some black cardstock, I've white heat embossed the sentiment there. I'm so much happier with how it looks. And I think it really finishes off the card so much better than the purple would have. Okay, cut your strip, then use your paper snips to snip the edges off, and I then cut it into 3 pieces. So the first part was have a, the second was perfect, and the third was birthday. At this stage I wasn't sure if I was going to stick it directly onto the card or whether I was going to pop it up. So I just popped them aside for now. Using a blending brush, I had a really soft wash of the Highland Heather ink. Once again, I have blending brushes for some of my most favourite colours dedicated to that colour, and Highland Heather is one of them. So you didn't see me add any extra ink because I knew that there would be enough in my brush already to add that to my background. If you were doing it from scratch, just sort of tap it on your ink pad and then use some scratch paper to dab it off on so that you don't add too much colour. It's really important, especially when you want a really soft colour. Okay, now we're going to add a bow of white baker's twine. Gosh, I made a meal of tying that, didn't I? Sometimes I'm all thumbs. Once I'm happy with it, I'm now going to assemble it all. I use lots of adhesive, I really do. I can't stop myself. I added lots of dimensionals and I also use lots of seal as well. I kind of just want it to stay stuck. You could also use a liquid glue. I just tend to use the tape runner instead. Okay, now we're just assembling it. I just cut that there because you didn't need to see me take off all of those backings. I also thought I needed it a little bit to give it a bit of shimmer, so I'm just gently adding a soft layer of the Wink of Stella. I just find that Wink of Stella is just a perfect way to just sort of finish off an image. I usually, when I'm doing a flower, I'll only do the petals. I don't tend to add them to the leaves. I figured the petals, all it really needs to have that shimmer. That's where I want the eye drawn. I'm now adding the bow that I tied out of the white baker's twine. Could tie it around the entire die cut, but I've just attached it with a glue dot. That's all you need. I just trim it up so the ends are a little bit more even. I'm adding the sentiment and I've decided I am going to pop them up. I like that dimension. I think it'll look good. So just add my Stampin' Dimensionals to the back. I did play around with the location. Once again, if you haven't taken off the backing, you can do that. If you have taken off the backing, don't press it down firmly until you work out that you're happy with where it is and then push it firmly in, because sometimes you do have a little bit of wiggle room. Not very long, and so you have to be careful, but you might have a bit of wiggle room. My final touch this time is to add some pearls. I think they're lovely. I don't use them anywhere near enough, but I love how they look. And that is my card for today. I hope this has inspired you and you'll give it a go. Perhaps try some different colours. All the supplies you'll need and the instructions can be found on my blog at stampersworkshop.com. Thanks for watching.